Okay, random slow motion clip number 4. This is UFC 199, the main event, round 1. Michael the Count Bisping versus Luke Rockhold. Now, if you've watched the last couple of clips, it should be increasingly clear that the reality of MMA striking is quite different from some of the choreographed striking we often see online. Fighting at its highest levels is inherently messy and chaotic. Now, the purpose of these clips isn't just to draw attention to this disconnect, but it's also to help us truly appreciate the complexity of MMA striking and even accept and embrace and find beauty in this chaos. Now, along the way, I've been introducing some key concepts and terms from Ecological Dynamics, which is a fascinating area of research on human behavior. And I've linked an introductory video in the description on Ecological Dynamics, which I highly recommend if watching these clips resonate with you at all. In this clip, I want to introduce a couple of terms from the dynamic side of ecological dynamics, and these concepts draw from dynamical systems theory, which offers a helpful perspective for understanding fighters, not as programmable machines, but as complex adaptive dynamic systems that are constantly interacting with their environments. Okay, so a fighter can be viewed as a system because they are composed of many interconnected parts. They are also dynamic and complex because these parts interact both independently and interdependently, which results in a wide range of human behaviors. And lastly, they are adaptive. That is, they continuously learn and adjust to the challenges and problem spaces in their environments. Now, this differs from the more typical view that fighters behave more like machines with computer-like brains that can be programmed and controlled. And whether this is how fighters are viewed or not, it does seem to be implied through some of the training methodologies, which is centered on drilling fixed techniques or rehearsing patterns, as though a fighter's brain just simply stores and retrieves these predetermined responses. This obviously seems logical on the surface, but I think what these clips demonstrate is that it fails to account for the complexity and the adaptability of the behavior we're watching being expressed as both fighters are going at it. Additionally, we have a fighter as a system, fighting another fighter, which is a system. Both of them make this even bigger system, which is even more chaotic and complex. Now, there's a couple of terms here that I think are helpful to start truly appreciating how complex human movement actually is. The first is degrees of freedom. Now, each part of the body has one or more degrees of freedom, which is essentially the number of independent ways that the part can move. For example, the shoulder has 3 degrees of freedom. It can move up, down, forward, backwards, and it can also rotate. When you consider that the human body has over 200 joints, more than 600 muscles, each capable of moving in multiple directions and producing various forces, the possible configurations that the human body can achieve are simply staggering. Now, to make sense of all these potential configurations, the concept of a phase space is useful. Now, if you think of a phase space as this vast map of every possible movement or position a fighter can take, well, the larger the map, the more unpredictable and dynamic that the movements can become. I think this idea is really helpful when addressing one of the common critiques of MMA striking, that it's somehow inferior to boxing. You know, in combat sports, it's really the rules that effectively determine the size of this phase space. Boxing, for instance, well, that's limited to punches and footwork, I guess, and that creates a narrower phase space. This often results in movements that appear more controlled and precise. In contrast, MMA's phase space is enormous. There's punches, kicks, elbows, knees, there's grappling, takedowns in play. This has the potential, at least, for way more chaotic movement and behaviors, and that's just much greater. So I don't believe that MMA striking is more or less skilled in boxing. It's simply just a different skill set, and it's shaped by a broader set of possibilities and constraints. Now, this chaos isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think it's what makes MMA striking so fascinating. Fighters are constantly navigating this vast map of possibilities in real time. They're adapting to their opponent's unpredictable actions. And when we recognize this, then instead of executing these pre-programmed techniques, fighters are solving movement problems on the fly, and they're discovering what works in the moment. This can fundamentally shift how we approach practice and development. So again, one of the key takeaways here is that these traditionally isolated drills in bag work and pad work, as they're typically practiced, well, they don't seem to translate directly into fight night. The reason for that, again, is because these drills often ignore the perceptual component of action, isolating movements in a way that is completely disconnected from the realities of facing a live opponent. Real fighting is about the seamless interplay of perception and action. These two elements are inseparable. Now, let's circle back to Mike and Luke here and challenge the idea of textbook or ideal techniques again. Just look at the punch that initially knocked down Luke. What do we even call that? It's some kind of jabby, switching, hook-cross hybrid. Honestly, I have no idea, but what I do know is that it was functionally effective. That is, it got the job done. This is the reality of fighting. It's not about picture-perfect form. It's about adapting to the chaos and finding the solutions that work. Okay, that's it for now. Once more, much love, and as always, this is not a critique of fighters. If anything, it's out of a deep respect for them. I think we as coaches must push ourselves to better understand not just how the body moves, but how it learns to move. And thanks to you for the feedback so far. It'll help me adapt and course correct going forward.